Merry Christmas, everyone. There's three things that you shouldn't talk about in a polite company: politics, religion, and how to wire a model railroad. I'm going to violate the third one, along with my helper Ollie here, who you've seen in some other videos. This is going to be part one. I'm going to show you how to install the feeders on my Oak Hill diorama, or Oak Hill switching layout. And in part two, which will be after Christmas, I'll show you how to hook up the bus wires and attach it to the NCE system. So, Merry Christmas. Hey everybody. Still lacking some supplies to do all my wiring, but I'll talk about some of the things that I had to do to prep for the wiring. First of all, I went to a hardware store. I got some 16 gauge wire, two colors. Went to the hardware store because I just had to buy what I need. Again, my layout's only 7 feet long basically, so I just bought 10 feet of wire, white and black. Has some suitcase connectors. I bought these from Micromark, I think. Some people have mixed feelings about these, but I've got two tips, what I've been researching. Number one, never reuse them. Once you snap them in place, don't unsnap it and use it again. And the other thing is to make sure you use it only with the right gauge of wire. So if these are for example, like a 12 to 16 gauge wire for the big one, don't expect it to work on an 18 gauge wire. So these are actually for a 16 gauge will be fine for my bus wire, and I think it's 20 to 24 for the feeder wires, and the ones I have coming are 22 gauge, so they should just work fine. I've never used them before, I'll be honest with you. I've never used them, but I've been reading up on them. Sounds like an easy, neat way to do it. My other layout, I wouldn't show you the wiring for $1,000. It's terrible. I didn't use these. I tried to strip off the bus wire and wire the feeders to it. Since my wife sits there and plays the piano, she can see up underneath it, so I put a cover over it to hide all the wiring. And then when you add in the just plug wiring on top of that for the lights, it's a real jungle under there. The layout runs great. Wiring does what it's supposed to, but it looks terrible. So I'm going to try to do a better job on this one. I don't know if you can see it with the angle app. I've got to put the fascia on, and I'll talk about how to do the fascia when I show you how to do the light valence, because it's the same process basically. Put a coat of brown paint on this just to make it look a little bit better than it was. Now I've gone ahead, in Lance Mentheim's book, he talks about a 3/32 airplane bit. Lowe's didn't have them. They had a 1/8 inch airplane bit, so it's the cat's wanting some attention here. So it's close, but it's just a little bit bigger than that. Not going to be a big deal, but in his layout, he's building an HO layout. And so it will go between the ties, because you want to drill the hole as close to the rail as you can, and this one will not. If I tried to do that, I'd mess up the ties. One thing I could do is I could cut the web in between some of the ties. I could move them out of the way temporarily, like I did those, and then I could drill my hole and I could push it back. So you will have to make some adjustment unless you can get to 3/32, and even 3/32, I don't know if it will go between end scale ties. Another thing he talks about in there is, after you remember, I've got a hollow core door on the bottom of this. So when you try to feed your wire down through there, yeah, it'll go through the foam, no problem. When it gets that hollow core door, you have no idea where that wire is going. If it just bends a little bit, it's not going to find this little hole. So I took a bigger bit. I made the hole a little bit bigger. So on the back side, on the hollow core door, so on the back side, I put it through. I think I've moved this a little bit. Now I'm hitting something. Maybe it's that one. Yeah, there we go. Now it will go right through, no problem. Then I got to thinking, well, why do I have to have a bunch of these holes? Why not just drill a bigger hole and just have all the feeder wires, because some of these places the feeder wires are pretty close together. I can just have them all come out there. As long as I solder them and don't get them mixed up, I'll be fine. So I went ahead and did that. I've drilled all my locations for my feeders. I flipped the layout over. I drilled these holes in here. So when I get my feeder wire, which I haven't got in the mail yet, I'll be ready to do that. Something else I did to prep. This track has been in the garage for a couple years. And I noticed a little bit of corrosion on it, not anything that's eating into the rail, but just on the sides and things like that, which clean up. But I thought, well, I really want a good solder connection. So I took my Dremel, I've got this little brass brush here, and I just cleaned wherever my feeders were going to be soldered. I just cleaned next to that. It's really shiny now. Just a couple seconds, don't have to do a lot. I'm not trying to grind anything away, obviously. I think that'll make for a good solder connection. So those are some tips. Again, as soon as I get my feeder wires, I will show you how I, at least one pair, show you how I solder them on. Then I'll flip it over and show you how I attach it to the bus wire. I do want to say before I forget about it, again, Ron's Trains and Things. When I endorse somebody, that's somebody I've learned from, but I've never met Ron. I don't get any money from him or any sponsors or anything. I'm just trying to help you out. Ron's Trains and Things has a really good video on soldering feeder wires. Has some good tips, and he just had a video come up about how to build. He's putting a double second level on his part of his layout, his extension, and he used a different type of shelf bracket than I did. So I'm going to show those to you. Just so you don't think you have to use the same type of bracket that I did. Okay. These are the brackets. This is a shelf in my garage to keep some tools and things on that I don't use that often. Got them from Lowe's. The advantage of these is they're very cheap and they're strong. So this is what Ron used for his shelf, because he's building the layout in the basement and he didn't worry about it. And he can cover it up with his backdrop for the second level. Anyhow, he doesn't have to worry about them what's in. But if you're in a bedroom, the disadvantage of these, or an office, is they hang down below the shelf. They're sort of an eyesore. So my wife didn't like those. She wanted the other ones. There won't be anything visible down underneath. It's an option. It'll save you quite a bit of money if you go with these, and they're strong enough. He actually shows where he had to bend them to get them level. So just wanted to share that with you. As promised, I'm going to briefly show you how I solder feeders on. So I've got my feeder wire. It's 22 gauge solid wire. I've got black and white, same color as my bus wires. I'm putting the black toward the front of the layout, white toward the back. I don't have any curves or reverse loops or anything like that. As long as I keep the black toward the front, I'm fine. Some of the tools I'm using, I just have this old soldering iron. I think it's about maybe 30 watts, something like that. Does the job. It's hot right now, so I have to make sure I don't touch it. Wire strippers. If you're going to do this a lot, don't get a cheap pair of wire strippers like this. These are the ones that come in like the kits with the terminals and stuff, and they're just junk. Buy a good set of wire strippers. I keep telling myself I'm going to do that. I think, well, how much do I actually use these things? And I've never done it, and they're just junk. So don't buy those kits from Advance Auto or wherever that come with all the stuff. If you do, throw these away and get some real wire strippers. My feeder wires, I cut them about 6 inches long. Hopefully you can see this. You put a little bend in them, 2 bends actually. Put a little hook at the side, and then you bend it in so it lays against the rail. And I'll show you the benefit of that when we get down to actually putting them in. I like to have a pair of tweezers help me position it. The rosin core solder, I like this really thin stuff. If you get the real thick stuff, you get a big blob of solder. It takes longer to melt, and you'll get a big blob on it. So I like this really thin stuff. You can control it a lot better. Soldering paste, or some people call it flux. This will last forever. I can probably hand it down to my generations of family, since I don't do this for a living. You just put a little dab on, and I'll show you how you do that. I've built layouts without soldering flux. As long as you have clean joints and clean wire, you don't really need it, but I think it does make for a better or solder. So I'm going to move the camera down close in so you can see what I'm doing. Let's see how this goes. Last time I tried to do something live on camera was when I was messing with those coupler springs, and that didn't go very well. So take toothpick and you just get a little bit of flux on it. Again, I've cleaned these up, and I'm putting these feeders on right where the rail joiners are in this case. Don't always have to do that, but killing two birds with one stone in a way. So downside of that is you can have a little bit bigger solder joint. Upside of it is you have less solder joints if you're going to solder your feeders. So I'm just putting a little bit of flux on there. Again, the black toward the front. I'm going to stick it through there. You see I've got that bend in it. I'm going to grab with my tweezers, and I'm going to put it down and see how it's trying to bend toward the rail. And it puts a little bit of pressure on it and holds it against the rail, which is what you want it to do. Okay, you want it to be against the rail. Okay, you also want to make sure it's not sticking up above the rail. I've had that happen before where it's you run your finger over it and you got a little bump, and that's no good. So it's very hard to disguise too. Okay, that's pretty good. Another thing you can do too, I don't recommend this, but if you have the problem with the feeder keeps trying to move away from the rail and you want it to be closer, you can sort of take a toothpick and hold it because the toothpick won't stick to the, you can't do it with something metal because the solder will stick to it, but you can push it, the wire against the rail, and then pull the soldering gun away real quick. Of course, the toothpick will start to smoke if you do it for too long. Okay, so I've got that about where I think I want it. I'll get my soldering iron, and don't know if I can do this without blocking you. You don't put the soldering iron right on the wire, you put it on the rail and let it heat it up, and then you feed the solder in, let it melt. Shouldn't take too long. I have tinned that wire already. There we go. All right. I think that's a good joint. You don't want to, if it turns black, you don't want to sort of have some impurities in it or something. You don't really want that. I think that's a pretty good joint. You can let it, cool for a few seconds and sort of tug on it from down below. But I'm pretty happy with that. I think that'll paint up nice. So excuse the shakiness. This is a different one than the one I just soldered. But that's about what you want it to look like. You want it to be, pretty close against the rail. There's not I'm not going to have a big bump there. I can take my pliers and actually bend this in a little bit closer to the rail. I want to sort of camouflage it. It won't show up though when I go to ballast the track and paint it and everything. Should be able to disguise it pretty well. I'm going to solder the rest of the feeders now, and when I'm done, I will flip it over and I'll show you how I run the bus wire and attach the feeders to the bus wire.